January 28th, 2026, Beijing, the Great Hall of the People. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer sits across from Xi Jinping for 80 minutes, double the scheduled time. According to Downing Street, it is the first visit by a British leader to China in 8 years. 8 years of frozen relations. 8 years of summoned ambassadors and cancelled dialogues and mutual sanctions. All of it ending in a single handshake. Starmer brought 60 business executives with him: HSBC, Barclays, AstraZeneca, Jaguar Land Rover, McLaren, Brompton Bikes, Airbus, the largest British business delegation to China in a decade. The message was unmistakable. Britain was open for business. The same day, according to CNBC, President Donald Trump calls the visit very dangerous. According to the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Republican Chairman Brian Mast warns that Britain should be under no illusion that China is their friend. This is the same regime that hacked the UK election system, flooded Parliament with spies. According to Representative John Moulinaire, chairman of the House Select Committee on China, American intelligence data could now be at risk. And according to MI5 internal assessments reported by British media, the security risks of Britain's new China policy cannot be wholly eliminated. So here's the question no one in London wants to answer. Why is America's closest ally running toward its greatest rival while Washington watches in disbelief? The answer is not ideology. It is not diplomacy. It is not even trade. It is desperation. And the numbers prove it. Welcome to frozen assets. The world is shifting, and what is happening behind the headlines is about to change everything. Here is what they told you. According to Prime Minister Starmer's December 2024 speech at the Lord Mayor's banquet, Britain's new China policy follows a framework of 3 C's. Cooperate where we can, compete where we need to, challenge where we must. He called it pragmatic, consistent, and strategic. Starmer laid out his reasoning explicitly. For years, the narrative ran that China was the coming power. Well, now it has arrived, and the UK needs a China policy that recognizes this reality. We had the golden age of relations under David Cameron and George Osborne, which then flipped to an ice age that some still advocate. According to Foreign Secretary David Lammy during his October 2024 Beijing visit, the first senior ministerial visit of the new government, this approach represents mature diplomacy. Engagement, not isolation. Dialogue, not confrontation. He met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. He visited Shanghai. He announced the 3 C's framework as official policy. According to Chancellor Rachel Reeves, after leading a January 2025 delegation to Beijing, the reset will deliver £600 million for working people. She brought the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey. She brought executives from HSBC and Standard Chartered. She restarted the UK-China economic and financial dialogue after a 6-year freeze. The official narrative sounds reasonable. China is the world's 2nd largest economy. It accounts for 18% of global GDP. According to British government trade data, China plus Hong Kong represents Britain's 3rd largest trading partner. You cannot ignore a market of 1.4 billion people. You cannot pretend it does not exist. And so Britain, according to this logic, is simply being realistic. The Conservative government tried confrontation for 6 years after the Hong Kong crackdown. Relations froze. Ambassadors were summoned. Trade talks collapsed. Nothing improved. Now Labour is trying something different. Starmer himself stated this explicitly during his Beijing visit. Like it or not, China matters for the UK. As one of the world's biggest economic players, a strategic and consistent relationship with them is firmly in our national interest. I do not think it is wise for the United Kingdom to stick its head in the sand. China is the 2nd biggest economy in the world. That is the official position. Pragmatism over ideology. Economics over politics. Engagement over isolation. It sounds responsible. It sounds sensible. It sounds like a lie. Here is what they do not mention. According to UK government trade statistics from the 4 quarters to Q2 2025, Britain runs a £42 billion trade deficit with China. That deficit grew 18% in a single year. British imports from China hit £72.5 billion, up 4.3%. British exports to China fell to £30.5 billion, down 10.4%. That is not a partnership. That is extraction. According to the same official data, Britain runs a £77.4 billion trade surplus with the United States. Total UK-US trade reached £331 billion. The United States accounts for 17.8% of all British trade. China accounts for 5.5%. According to the US Bureau of Economic Analysis, American foreign direct investment stock in Britain totals $1.1 trillion. According to UK government figures, Chinese FDI stock in Britain stands at just £3.7 billion. Do the math. America invests roughly 300 times more in Britain than China does. American exports to the UK are 6.7 times larger than Chinese exports. America provides a £77 billion surplus, while China extracts a £42 billion deficit that grows larger every year. So when Starmer says China matters for the UK economy, he is technically correct. But he is hiding the real story. Britain is not running toward opportunity. Britain is running away from dependency on an ally it no longer trusts to be reliable. According to Chatham House analysis from July 2025, the UK finds itself in a geopolitical position for which no obvious analog exists in its modern history. It is a middle power whose own relative power is declining, with an open economy geared to operating in a global order that is rapidly receding in relevance. That is not my analysis. That is Britain's most prestigious foreign policy think tank, describing a nation without a strategy, without leverage, and without good options. And here's the part they really do not want you to understand. According to RUSI analyst Andrew Caney, British policy represents what he calls cakeism, promising to secure all the benefits and address all the negatives that China presents, while ducking value judgments and tough choices on priorities. According to Charles Parton, former British diplomat and RUSI fellow, the lack of a clearly communicated strategy is the panda in the room. Britain has no public doctrine on China, no clear red lines, no stated priorities, just a vague commitment to the 3 Cs that can mean whatever the government wants it to mean on any given day. Downing Street tried to minimize the tension with Washington. According to British government statements, the White House received advance notice of Starmer's Beijing trip. Officials noted that Trump himself plans to visit China in April 2026, but the damage was done. Trump had called Britain's approach very dangerous on the world stage. Britain is not balancing between America and China. Britain is pretending it does not have to choose while both superpowers watch and wait. The evidence is damning when you examine what Britain says versus what Britain does. According to Starmer's own December 2024 speech, China poses a national security threat to Britain. Those are his exact words. National security threat. Yet according to British media reports from January 2026, his government approved China's mega embassy at Royal Mint Court in London, despite a joint MI5 and GCHQ letter acknowledging the security risks cannot be wholly eliminated. According to congressional testimony and planning documents, that proposed embassy would be the largest Chinese diplomatic facility in Europe, at up to 22,000 square meters. According to British press reports, citing the architectural plans, it includes 208 secret basement rooms. According to U.S. officials cited by the House Select Committee on China, the site sits above underground fiber optic cables carrying critical financial data between the City of London and global markets. The site was purchased by China in 2018 for £225 million. It sits near the Tower of London, in the heart of Britain's financial district. Representative John Moulinaire, chairman of the House Select Committee, stated publicly that the UK's decision defies common sense. It is effectively rewarding China for spying on Parliament, interfering in the UK's elections, and fueling Russia's war in Ukraine. Representative Chris Smith, co-chair of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, added that the Chinese Communist government gets the largest embassy in Europe, while a UK citizen is unjustly jailed in Hong Kong. Representative Keith Self of the Subcommittee on Europe called the proposed embassy an economic and security threat, not only to the United Kingdom, but the United States. But Britain approved it anyway. In January 2026, just days before Starmer flew to Beijing, the government signed off on the plans. The timing was not coincidental. According to Euronews reporting, China's foreign ministry had publicly stated that Britain had an obligation to approve the embassy. Beijing framed approval as a test of sincerity. Starmer passed the test, and the concessions did not stop there. According to British government announcements from July 2025, the enhanced tier of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme was activated to combat hostile state activity. This was legislation Labour had campaigned on. Tough measures against foreign interference. Russia was designated as a threat requiring registration. Iran was designated. China was not included. According to Conservative Shadow Minister Priti Patel in Parliament, Starmer's policy amounts to less compete, challenge, and cooperate, more cover-up, cave in, and cash out. The pattern continues across every dimension of the relationship. According to British court records from October 2025, the UK quietly dropped spy charges against 2 British men accused of working for Chinese intelligence. The case simply disappeared from the docket. No explanation, no public statement. According to reports from Starmer's Beijing visit, he raised the case of Jimmy Lai, the British citizen and media entrepreneur imprisoned in Hong Kong under the national security law. Lai is 77 years old. He founded Apple Daily, a pro-democracy newspaper that Beijing forced to close. He has been detained since December 2020. According to Downing Street readouts, Starmer secured no concrete progress toward release. Lai faces potential life imprisonment for the crime of journalism. The contrast tells the story. Britain protests. China ignores. Britain asks again. China changes nothing. Britain sends more business delegations anyway. According to the Grant Thornton Towing Tracker from 2024, 931 Chinese-owned companies now operate in Britain, supporting approximately 61,000 jobs. Chinese investment in the UK rebounded 47% in 2024, the first significant increase since 2016. TikTok alone employs 8,503 British workers, making it the largest Chinese employer in the country. Chinese M&A transactions in Britain nearly doubled in 2024, reaching 37 deals. According to Bank of England data analysed by financial media, London processes approximately £172 billion in offshore renminbi trading annually. That volume rose 43% in 2024. Over half of all offshore renminbi trading globally, outside of Asia, takes place in Britain. More than 40 Chinese financial institutions operate in the City of London. According to the January 2025 Economic and Financial Dialogue outcomes, China committed to issuing its first offshore sovereign green bond in London. British firms like HSBC and Schroders received new commercial licenses to operate in China. The UK Treasury hailed this as tangible progress. But according to parliamentary debate records from March 2025, opposition MPs called the £600 million outcome rather uninspiring and hardly the sign of a robust or indeed equitable economic relationship. For context, Britain's trade deficit with China exceeds that figure in a single week. This is not trade diversification. This is dependency creation disguised as diplomacy. The evidence keeps piling up when you examine the security dimension. According to CBS News coverage of an unprecedented October 2023 event, all 5 heads of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance appeared together publicly for the first time in history. The directors of intelligence from America, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand stood on stage at Stanford University. They chose a university setting. They chose civilian media. They chose to issue a joint warning. They chose to name the threat by name. FBI Director Christopher Wray stated that the People's Republic of China represents the defining threat of this generation. According to his testimony, there's no country that presents a broader, more comprehensive threat to our ideas, our innovation, our economic security, and ultimately our national security. According to the same appearance, Wray revealed that China runs a bigger hacking program than every other major nation combined. And why 5? Director General Ken McCallum reported a 35% increase in individuals under investigation for state threat activity in just 1 year. According to his statement, this includes espionage against our parliament, our universities, our critical infrastructure. According to MI5 estimates reported by the House of Commons Library, Chinese operatives have contacted over 20,000 people in the UK for intelligence purposes. GCHQ Director Anne Keast-Butler confirmed in May 2024 that her agency now devotes more resource to China than any other single mission. More than terrorism, more than Russia, more than any other threat. According to Computer Weekly reporting on the Stanford event, the intelligence chiefs warned of an unprecedented campaign to steal Western technology and intellectual property. They described it as the most sustained, sophisticated state espionage operation in history. Yet Britain is resetting relations anyway. According to Sir Ian Duncan Smith, one of the British MPs sanctioned by China over his criticism of Xinjiang policies, approving the mega embassy could jeopardize intelligence sharing with the United States. A senior U.S. source told British media that in a world where leverage with China matters, the UK is giving up all its leverage in the hope of a trade deal. A formal congressional letter to UK Ambassador Lord Peter Mandelson in February 2025 warned that approving the embassy would embolden its efforts to intimidate and harass UK citizens and dissidents across Europe. This is not new. This is ancient. In 2015, Britain tried this exact approach. They called it the Golden Era. According to historical accounts and interviews, Chancellor George Osborne was described as evangelical about China. His mother had lived there in the 1970s. He backpacked through the country as a student. His daughter learned Mandarin. According to his September 2015 speech at the Shanghai Stock Exchange, Osborne declared, "Let us stick together and create a golden decade for both of our countries. Let us stick together and make Britain China's best partner in the West." He meant it. Britain would be the Western nation closest to Beijing. Britain would be China's gateway to Europe. Britain would profit from the relationship, while others watched from the sidelines. The following month, according to British royal protocols and diplomatic records, Xi Jinping received treatment reserved for Britain's closest allies. Queen Elizabeth hosted him at Buckingham Palace for 2 nights. A 103-gun salute, Britain's highest royal honour, welcomed him to London. He addressed both Houses of Parliament. David Cameron took him for fish and chips at a 16th-century pub in the Cotswolds. According to government announcements at the time, the visit produced £40 billion in deals. China took a 30% stake in the Hinkley Point C nuclear power station, giving Beijing a foothold in British critical infrastructure. Britain became the first G7 nation to join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank over explicit American objections. London established itself as the premier offshore renminbi trading center. Britain bet everything on becoming China's best partner in the West. The benefits were supposed to flow in both directions. Chinese investment would revitalize British infrastructure. Chinese tourists would flood British cities. Chinese students would fill British universities. British exports would find a market of 1.4 billion consumers. According to George Magnus of Oxford University's China Center, that bet categorically did not pay off. In his assessment, Osborne's approach opened the doors wide to dependency on China in nuclear financing and real estate. And all for what? Very little in terms of trade and economic benefit for the UK. I would call this period, for the UK at least, the fool's golden era. The numbers tell the story. According to trade data from the golden era period, Britain's deficit with China continued growing throughout. Chinese investment came, but on Beijing's terms, into sectors that served Chinese strategic interests. The flow was never reciprocal. The golden era ended abruptly in 2020. According to British government statements from June of that year, the Hong Kong national security law represented a clear and serious breach of the joint declaration. Britain had negotiated that treaty when it handed Hong Kong back to China in 1997. China had promised 50 years of autonomy. It lasted 23. Britain opened a visa pathway for 3 million Hong Kong residents holding British national overseas status. According to Home Office data, over 105,200 arrived within the first years. They brought capital, they brought skills, they brought stories of why they fled. 2 weeks after the Hong Kong statement, according to government announcements, Boris Johnson reversed the Huawei decision entirely. Britain had allowed the Chinese telecommunications giant into its 5G networks despite American warnings. Now all new Huawei equipment was banned from January 2021. All existing equipment had to be removed by 2027. According to telecommunications industry estimates, the removal cost exceeded £2 billion. According to diplomatic timelines, no British Prime Minister visited China for the next 8 years. The ambassador was summoned repeatedly. Chinese officials were sanctioned over Xinjiang human rights abuses. China sanctioned British MPs in return. The Conservative government spent 6 years trying confrontation. Relations froze. Trade flatlined. The Conservatives lost power in July 2024, partly due to economic stagnation that some blamed on Brexit isolation. Now Labour is trying the golden era approach again. Same playbook, same assumptions. Same belief that China will reward Britain for breaking Western ranks. Same desperation. Here is what this means for the world. According to Chatham House analysis, alignment with the US on China could become increasingly costly for the UK as Washington and London's interests diverge. Supporting US economic policies could result in the UK's exclusion from critical supply chains dominated by China and in the denial of access to Chinese technology that the UK cannot produce domestically. Their recommendation proved controversial within British policy circles. The UK should adopt a more explicitly autonomous approach to navigating Sino-US strategic competition, even if this means diverging significantly from the US on China-related issues. Britain's most respected foreign policy institution is advising London to hedge against Washington. According to the Center for American Progress analysis from January 2026, Beijing's charm offensive in Europe is not about convincing European leaders that China is a benevolent partner. It is about exploiting the vacuum left by America's unreliability. Starmer's visit was not isolated. According to diplomatic schedules reported by multiple outlets, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, and Finnish Prime Minister Petteri Orpo all visited Beijing in January 2026. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz was expected in February. French President Emmanuel Macron had recently hosted Xi with unusual ceremony. Middle powers across the Western alliance are recalculating their positions. They are watching Washington. They are watching each other. They are hedging. According to European Council on Foreign Relations analysis from January 2026, Britain's risky re-engagement with China could strain the EU-UK reset that Starmer has also been pursuing. Europe faces the same dilemma. Stay aligned with an unpredictable America or diversify toward China. Britain is moving first. Europe is watching to see what happens. According to Congressional Research Service analysis, Britain remains a core partner in the AU-KUS Trilateral Security Pact alongside the United States and Australia. That agreement, announced in September 2021, specifically aims to counter Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific through nuclear submarine technology sharing. Australia is acquiring nuclear-powered submarines with American and British assistance. The program is valued at hundreds of billions of dollars over decades. According to Chinese Foreign Ministry statements, Beijing considers AU-KUS evidence of Cold War mentality and a serious provocation. Chinese state media has called it a dangerous military bloc aimed at containment. Britain is simultaneously a founding member of an anti-China military alliance and actively courting Beijing for investment. Britain helped design the containment architecture and is now seeking exemptions from it. Britain is asking China to ignore AU-KUS while asking America to ignore the Beijing reset. The contradiction is not sustainable. Eventually, one relationship breaks. According to Dr. Yu Jie, Senior Research Fellow on China at Chatham House, Beijing sees diplomatic value in this contradiction. In her analysis, diplomatically, Beijing hopes it will not become a rival to every country in the West, and nor does it wish to look isolated at multilateral foray. China wants to prevent total Western unity. Britain is volunteering to break ranks, and China will reward that, just enough to encourage more, just enough to keep Britain coming back. The fool's golden era is beginning again, so what happens next? Based on current trajectory, Britain will continue deepening economic ties with China while maintaining security commitments to the United States. According to the pattern established since July 2024, each concession to Beijing produces another. Embassy approval, dialogue resumption, investment deals, spy charge dismissals, FIRS exclusion. The escalation has its own momentum. Based on the trade data, Britain's deficit with China will continue growing. According to the 18% year-over-year increase already documented, that £42 billion gap will approach £50 billion within 2 years. Britain will import more, export less. The extraction will accelerate. Based on congressional statements and committee actions, American pressure will intensify. According to the pattern of bipartisan criticism already established, intelligence sharing concerns will escalate as the embassy construction proceeds. The Five Eyes partnership will face its first serious test of cohesion since its formation. Based on the diplomatic calendar, Starmer's Beijing visit will be followed by more engagement, not less. According to the joint statement from the Xi meeting, both sides committed to regular high-level dialogue. That means more visits, more deals, more dependencies. Based on the historical parallel with the Golden Era, this approach will not deliver the economic benefits Britain expects. According to George Magnus's assessment of the previous attempt, the cycle of dependency creation, failed expectations, and eventual reversal will repeat. The only question is how long it takes and how much Britain loses in the process. The question is not whether Britain's bet fails. The question is what Britain loses while waiting to discover it has failed again. If Five Eyes intelligence sharing degrades, Britain loses its most valuable strategic asset, the relationship that makes a medium-sized island relevant on the world stage. According to former MI6 Chief Sir John Sawers, intelligence partnerships cannot be rebuilt once broken. Trust, once lost, does not return. The Americans have long memories. They remember when allies chose differently. If American investment flows elsewhere, Britain loses the economic relationship that actually generates surplus. According to the $1.1 trillion in US FDI stock already in Britain, that dwarfs anything China offers or ever will offer. American companies employ millions of British workers. American capital finances British growth. That relationship is not easily replaced. If middle powers across Europe follow Britain's example, the Western alliance fragments exactly as Beijing intends. According to Brookings Institution analysis, a divided United States and Europe cannot effectively push back against Chinese overcapacity, safeguard critical technologies, or guard against cyber threats. Beijing understands this dynamic well. Beijing is counting on it. Britain apparently does not. Empires are not built on ideology. They are built on resources. They always have been. They always will be. Britain once commanded the largest empire in human history. It controlled the seas, the trade routes, the financial flows. It dictated terms to the world. The sun never set on British possessions. That empire is gone. The resources are gone. The leverage is gone. What remains is an island nation trying to matter in a world that has moved on. What remains is a middle power with declining influence, a stagnant economy, and no good options. Running toward China while America watches is not strategy. It is survival instinct dressed up as diplomacy. It is a former empire, grasping for relevance. The pattern is clear. Britain tried the Golden Era in 2015. It failed spectacularly. Britain tried confrontation from 2020. That failed too. Huawei was banned. Relations froze. Nothing improved. Now Britain is trying the golden era again, hoping for different results. That is not strategy. That is desperation wearing a diplomatic smile. According to RUSI analysis, this is cakeism. According to Chatham House, this is a position for which no obvious analog exists. According to the trade data, this is a nation extracting from one relationship while depending on another, pretending it can have both without consequence. They told you this was about pragmatism. Now you know what it is really about. If this changed how you see the world, subscribe. The future is being decided right now. I will show you how.